I didn't plan to exclude anyone. That's the part people always get wrong. I didn't wake up one morning thinking, how do I manipulate a group vacation to quietly erase one person from it? I didn't do it out of jealousy. I didn't do it because I didn't trust my boyfriend. I did it because something inside me started screaming that if I didn't protect my relationship, no one else would. And because I had already tried being polite. I was 25 years old, living with my boyfriend of almost 4 years, talking about marriage, planning a future that felt solid and earned. From the outside, my life looked calm, stable, normal. But behind that calm was a woman who kept smiling a little too long at my boyfriend. A woman who laughed every time she crossed a line, then told me I was too sensitive when I noticed. A woman who sat in my living room on New Year's Eve, looked straight at my boyfriend, and said she wanted him as her midnight kiss, with me sitting right there. And everyone laughed. That was the moment something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet click in my chest, like a door locking. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't accuse her of anything. I went to bed that night with my boyfriend beside me, staring at the ceiling, replaying her voice in my head and wondering how many times I'd already swallowed my discomfort just to keep the peace. When the group trip planning started months later, cabins, dates, shared bedrooms, I realized something I hadn't admitted yet. I didn't feel safe anymore, not physically, emotionally. So when I saw a way to change the dates, cheaper, earlier, easier, and I knew she wouldn't be able to come, I took it, quietly. No confrontation, no accusations, no drama. Or so I thought. Because the truth is, when you don't deal with obsession early, it doesn't disappear. It waits. And sometimes, it watches. I'm the kind of person who used to believe that if you stay reasonable, if you stay kind, things stay reasonable and kind back. I grew up watching adults smooth over tension with jokes, and it's not that serious, like conflict was something you could starve by refusing to look at it. So when I met Ryan during sophomore year of college, I honestly thought I'd found the safest kind of love. Steady, mutual, uncomplicated. Ryan was 26 now, but when we first met, we were 19 and still figuring out who we wanted to be. We were in the same lecture hall for an economics class that neither of us actually enjoyed. I remember him tapping his pen against his notebook like he was trying to keep himself awake, and then looking over at me with this small, amused smile, like we were both silently agreeing the professor was putting us to sleep. Later, we ended up in the same study group. He didn't flirt in that obvious, performative way. He asked questions. He listened. When I spoke, he looked at me like my words mattered. It sounds simple, but at 19, it felt rare. We started dating by the end of that semester. At first, it was the usual college love story. Late-night ramen, cramped dorm rooms, walking back from parties with our hands tucked into the same hoodie pocket because it was cold and we were ridiculous. But what made Ryan different wasn't the romance. It was the consistency. Even when we argued, he didn't go mean. Even when he was stressed, he didn't vanish. He showed up. We did have a brief breakup, 2 weeks, our first summer apart when we were both 19. Long distance, new schedules, insecurity we didn't know how to name yet. It wasn't some epic betrayal. It was two teenagers who thought love should be effortless and panicked the first time it required work. We got back together, but that was the real beginning, not the end. Because after that, we became intentional. We learned how to talk when something bothered us. We learned how to apologize without keeping score. We learned that commitment wasn't a feeling, it was a behavior. By the time we graduated, our relationship had already survived the messy version of us. We moved in together 2 years ago, and life became quieter in the best way. Groceries, laundry, Sunday mornings, little habits that felt like building blocks. We were part of a large college friend group, around 14 of us who stayed close. The kind of group that feels like family when you're young. Birthdays, game nights, group chats that never stop buzzing, and annual trips that everyone swears they'll plan earlier next time. That's where Megan existed. Megan was 24, a dental hygienist, and she had this energy that made people lean in. She talked fast, laughed loud, took up space like she was allowed to. A lot of people loved her because she was entertaining, the type who could carry a conversation at a party. At first, I didn't mind her at all. I don't want to rewrite history and pretend I immediately clocked her as a problem. I didn't. She was just there. A friend of a friend who became a fixture. She'd show up to gatherings, comment in group chats, share memes, complain about work, and then slowly she started orbiting Ryan in this way that was subtle enough to deny, but consistent enough to feel. It was never one huge thing at the start. It was little moments. A joke that landed too close to flirting. A hand on his arm that stayed a second too long. A Ryan would get it comment when I was literally standing right there. And the worst part was that Ryan never encouraged it. If anything, he looked uncomfortable sometimes, then brushed it off like he didn't want to seem rude. I brushed it off too. Because that's what women are trained to do, isn't it? Be chill. Be cool. Don't be that girlfriend. But the more serious Ryan and I got, talking about marriage, future plans, the possibility of moving to a bigger place, the more Megan's behavior started to feel less like friendly teasing and more like testing. Like she was poking at the edges of our relationship to see what would give. And I didn't fully understand that until New Year's Eve. Because that night didn't just embarrass me, it revealed her. And it revealed something about the people around us too, how easily they laughed when the joke was built on disrespect. New Year's Eve was supposed to be easy. No big crowd, no club, just our apartment, a few close friends, drinks on the counter, music low enough that we could actually hear each other talk. The kind of night that feels safe because everyone in the room knows everyone else. It was me, Ryan, Megan, and 3 other friends. Nothing wild, no one was out of control. People were drinking, but not sloppy. Laughing, but still present. That's important, because later, when Megan tried to brush everything off as just being drunk, I replayed the night in my head over and over, and nothing about her seemed accidental. At some point, we were all sitting around the living room, half watching something on TV, half on our phones. The countdown was still a while away. Megan leaned forward on the couch, looked directly at Ryan, and said, clear as day, I think you're really attractive. I want you to be my midnight kiss. The room went quiet in that way people don't like to acknowledge. Ryan reacted immediately. He said no, not joking, not flirty, just a firm no, as he shifted away from her on the couch. I was sitting right there. Megan laughed, waving it off. Relax, I'm kidding. But the laugh came a beat too late, and the smile didn't reach her eyes. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Not rage, not yet, but something sharper. Awareness. The kind that makes your body tense before your brain catches up. Nobody else said anything. Someone changed the subject. Someone made a joke. The moment dissolved, like it never happened. Except it did. Later that night, during the countdown, when everyone was standing, watching the TV, glasses raised, Megan somehow tripped and landed directly in Ryan's lap. There was nothing on the floor. She hadn't been unsteady all night. Ryan stood up instantly, almost knocking over his drink, and moved away. He didn't touch her. He didn't laugh. He walked straight over and sat next to me instead, his arm brushing mine like he was grounding himself. That was the moment I knew this wasn't harmless. If it were a joke, she would have been embarrassed. If it were accidental, she would have apologized. Instead, she smiled. I didn't confront her that night, not because I didn't care, but because I cared about the room, about not detonating something in front of people who weren't prepared to see it, about not being labeled dramatic or insecure on a holiday that everyone wanted to remember as fun. Ryan and I talked the next morning. He told me it made him uncomfortable. He said he'd never done anything to encourage her and didn't like being put in that position. He promised he'd keep his distance from her at future gatherings. I believed him. The problem wasn't Ryan. The problem was that Megan didn't stop. Months later, when group trip planning started, first camping, then something bigger, it was like all those moments finally connected into a pattern I couldn't unsee. She joked about sleeping arrangements. She made comments about how Ryan and I had broken up once, like it was evidence that anything was possible. When I told her calmly that those jokes weren't okay with me, she laughed and said I was too sensitive. That was the seed, because once someone tells you that your discomfort is the problem, they're telling you exactly how much they respect your boundaries. And I realized something that scared me. She wasn't confused. She was testing how far she could go. By the time March rolled around, I wasn't imagining things anymore. The camping trip plans had already been adjusted once to accommodate Megan's work schedule. People moved days around. One couple canceled a weekend they'd already booked. Everyone bent a little so she could be included, and she promised she'd be there. That should have been the end of it. But then Sarah suggested something else. A beach trip. Myrtle Beach. A rented house close to the water. Fewer people, more space. Actual beds instead of cabins that smelled like damp wood and bug spray. The idea took off immediately. The final group was small. Me, Ryan, Sarah, Megan, and Jake. 5 people, 3 bedrooms. Simple. Ryan and I would obviously share a room. Sarah wanted her own. Jake didn't care. Couch, air mattress, whatever. That left one bedroom for Megan. On paper, there was nothing to discuss. But in the group chat, while we were talking about food and packing lists, Megan found a way to make it something. She typed, "Too bad I can't just sleep in Ryan's bed. Would be way more comfortable than sleeping alone." There it was. Not whispered, not implied, written out for everyone to read. Sarah reacted with a laughing emoji, the social equivalent of, "Please don't make this awkward." But my chest tightened. My fingers hovered over my phone as my brain raced through the familiar options. Ignore it, laugh it off, be the cool one. I didn't. I replied that it wasn't funny and that I didn't appreciate jokes like that. Her response came fast. She told me I was being too sensitive, that she was obviously kidding. And then, like she'd been waiting for an excuse, she brought up Ryan and me, breaking up years ago, saying I should know these things happen and shouldn't be so worried. That wasn't a joke. That was a calculated comment meant to destabilize me, to remind me of an old insecurity that no longer applied, to suggest that my relationship wasn't as solid as I believed, to justify her own behavior by rewriting history. I stared at my phone, heart pounding, realizing something had shifted permanently. This wasn't about one inappropriate comment anymore. This was about respect, about boundaries, about someone repeatedly inserting herself into my relationship and then gaslighting me when I objected. I messaged Sarah privately afterward. She admitted she'd noticed Megan making comments about Ryan before, but she hadn't wanted to cause drama. Hearing that confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't alone in noticing it. I was just the only one affected enough to say something. And that's when the realization hit me fully. I could not spend 3 days in a beach house with someone who openly disrespected my relationship. I considered confronting Megan directly again, but I knew how it would go. She'd deny, laugh, tell me I was overreacting, and I'd walk away feeling smaller for even trying. So instead, I found the dates. 4 days earlier, same house, slightly cheaper. And I knew, because she'd complained about it before, that Megan wouldn't be able to get those days off. I checked with Ryan first, then Sarah, then Jake. They all said yes. Only after that did I change the booking. When I announced it in the group chat, Megan immediately said she couldn't make the new dates and asked why I hadn't checked with everyone first. I apologized. I lied. I said I'd acted fast because I didn't want to lose the cheaper option. The trip went on without her, and at the time, I thought that was the end of it. I didn't realize I had just triggered something far bigger. The trip was everything I hoped it would be. Simple, relaxed, no tension. Just the 4 of us. We spent the days at the beach, the nights cooking together and playing games. We talked, we laughed. There were no jokes about Ryan, no glances that lingered too long, no comments made to remind me of my place. It was normal. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. But the price I paid for that peace was guilt. I knew what I had done. I knew I had manipulated the dates, used information I'd learned from Megan herself to cut her out. It wasn't some grand, noble act. I wasn't the martyr. I had made a calculated choice to protect my relationship, but I couldn't stop the nagging feeling that I had gone too far. What if I was overreacting? What if this was just a misunderstanding and I'd made it worse? Ryan didn't know the full truth. I hadn't told him about the group chat exchange, the sleep in Ryan's bed comment, or the way it made my stomach churn. Instead, I'd stuck with the story about finding a better deal on the house. He believed it. But I could feel the lie hanging between us like smoke, like something waiting to come out. I kept telling myself I had made the right decision. I had protected my relationship. But the more I thought about Megan, the more I started to doubt my own reasoning. Had I taken the easy way out? Should I have confronted her head-on instead of secretly manipulating the situation? When I told Ryan about what had happened on New Year's Eve, he was surprised, but not upset. He said he was uncomfortable, but that was it. He didn't want to escalate anything. He promised he'd keep his distance from her moving forward. But I wondered, had I just been trying to protect myself from feeling weak? Did it feel easier to blame Megan and avoid facing the real issue between us? And then, just when I thought the worst of it was behind me, Megan's behavior escalated in a way I hadn't predicted. She was quiet after the trip. She didn't say much in the group chat. I thought maybe she was just embarrassed. I told myself maybe she'd realize what she'd done and would lay low for a while. But then I heard from Jake. It was subtle at first. He mentioned in passing that Megan had been asking him about Ryan's schedule, how often he went to the coffee shop where Jake worked, and when he was usually there. I felt a chill run through me. I didn't want to believe it. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe she was just trying to stay in the loop. But the way Jake described it, it didn't sound like coincidence. Megan knew things she shouldn't. She was watching Ryan. The next thing that happened was more disturbing. Ryan came home one evening and mentioned that he'd seen her car parked on our street. Twice. I didn't want to believe it. It was a mistake, right? She was just in the neighborhood, maybe visiting someone else. But then it happened again, 3 days later, and again a week later. I realized then that I wasn't dealing with someone who was just a little too friendly. I was dealing with someone who had crossed a line, who couldn't take no for an answer, who was now using every chance to insert herself into our lives. That night, Ryan told me he'd seen her car on our street again. The difference this time was that he decided to test it. When he went outside to grab the mail, he saw her car, and the second she noticed him, she drove off quickly. I knew, deep down, that this was no longer about a bad joke at a party. It was about obsession. It was about Megan trying to claim what she believed was hers, Ryan. I couldn't stay silent anymore. It felt like everything I had tried to ignore, the little moments, the uncomfortable glances, the offhand comments, was all coming to a head. Ryan and I couldn't deny it anymore. Megan's behavior had crossed a line, and it wasn't just awkward anymore. It was a real threat to our peace. The worst part was, neither of us felt like we could handle it alone. This wasn't something that could be swept under the rug. That's when we decided to confront Megan, together. But before we could even make a plan, things took another turn. It started with Jake, who told Ryan about Megan's increasing presence at the coffee shop. She'd been asking about Ryan's schedule, not just casual questions, detailed ones. How often he came in, what time of day, whether he was always alone. It felt invasive. It felt like stalking. Then came the car, the one parked outside our apartment. Ryan told me he had spotted it on multiple occasions. At first, he thought it was a coincidence. But after seeing it again and again, it was clear she was tracking his movements. That's when the panic set in. We had gone from feeling uncomfortable to feeling unsafe. I wanted to confront her then and there. I wanted to walk over to her and demand an explanation. But I knew that wouldn't fix it. Megan was clever. She knew how to manipulate a situation, how to play the victim when she was called out. I didn't want to be caught in her web of denial and gaslighting. Instead, we decided to take a step back, document everything, and try to handle it with a clear head. Ryan started taking pictures of her car whenever he spotted it outside our apartment, just in case it escalated further. He didn't want to be dramatic, but he also didn't want to be caught off guard. We even told our neighbors what was going on, so they'd be aware if anything strange happened around our building. They all agreed it was creepy, but they had never seen anything outright threatening. But just when I thought we were getting ahead of it, the situation spiraled even further. Megan's roommate, Emma, contacted me again. This time, her message was different. The usual defensive tone was gone. She was no longer defending Megan. She was scared. She told me that Megan had been behaving erratically, obsessively even, since our confrontation. Emma said that Megan had started going through Ryan's old Instagram posts, liking every single one, even the ones from years ago. She was compiling information. She had become fixated on every detail of our relationship, but it didn't stop there. Emma told me something that made my stomach turn. Megan had kept a notebook where she wrote down every interaction she had with Ryan, what he wore, what he said, how he looked at her. She was tracking everything, analyzing every moment like it was evidence in some twisted game she was playing in her head. Emma said she'd accidentally seen the notebook when she was cleaning up their living room. It was all there. Details about conversations, notes about his body language, the times Ryan had laughed at her jokes or made eye contact. It made my skin crawl. But it also confirmed what I had known all along. Megan wasn't confused. She wasn't just a little too friendly. She was obsessed. At this point, I realized I couldn't let this go any longer. Ryan and I had to take action before things got worse. We decided to file a report with campus security. We had photos of her car, times she'd been spotted near our building, and evidence from the group chat about her inappropriate comments. We didn't want it to escalate into something physical, but we knew that ignoring it wasn't an option anymore. The security officer took our report seriously. He told us that this type of behavior often escalates and advised us to continue documenting everything. He also suggested we inform our apartment management about the situation, just in case. It felt like we were preparing for a storm, but I had no idea how far Megan would go next. Then came the phone call. Megan, furious, reached out to me. She accused me of betraying her, of lying about everything, of making a drama out of nothing. She said I was just jealous. She tried to turn the situation around. make herself out to be the victim. But what she said next, the words she used, showed me how deep her delusion ran. She said if she had actually wanted to steal Ryan from me, she could have done it a long time ago. She could have had him whenever she wanted. It was only out of respect for our friendship that she'd held back. That was when I knew. I was no longer dealing with a misguided friend. I was dealing with someone who had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. This wasn't just about inappropriate comments anymore. It was about a woman who had convinced herself that Ryan and I weren't real, that our bond was something she could slip into if she tried hard enough. Ryan was furious. He told her how disrespectful and delusional she was. He told her that this wasn't friendship, it was obsession. That was the last straw. Megan hung up. And after that, she disappeared from the group chats. The days after Megan's disappearance from the group chats were strange. It was like a heavy silence settled over our friend group. People whispered about her, but no one really talked to us. The whole situation had made everyone uncomfortable, even those who were sympathetic to us. I couldn't blame them. After all, Megan wasn't just someone we could dismiss. She was part of the group for years. To suddenly find out that she had crossed so many boundaries, had been manipulating and obsessing over Ryan, was a betrayal of its own. Ryan and I had spent the week going through everything, all the little signs we had missed, all the warning flags we had ignored because we didn't want to believe Megan would go this far. But the truth was undeniable now. We had both been manipulated into thinking it was just harmless behavior. And now we were both left with the fallout. I remember sitting in the living room one night, staring at the empty space where our couch used to feel like home. Callie was in bed, thankfully oblivious to all of this. She was still young, still too innocent to understand the dynamics between people, the way a friendship could turn into something toxic without warning. I didn't cry, not then, but I felt something deeper, a kind of grief. Not for the betrayal itself, but for the version of my life I thought I had. The one I had worked so hard to build with Ryan, without drama, without any suspicion. I realized I was mourning something I could never get back. The simplicity of what I thought was real. When I wasn't lost in my thoughts, I was consumed by guilt. I started questioning everything. Did I go too far? Did I handle this the wrong way? I had manipulated the situation, yes, but when I replayed those group chat messages in my mind, the ones Megan had written, the comments she'd made about Ryan and me, I couldn't regret it. I just couldn't. I'd protected us. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was also losing something in the process. Our group of friends, people I thought were family, was splintering. I had kept Ryan safe, but now I wasn't sure if the fallout was worth it. We didn't just lose Megan. We lost the comfort of the group. People began to avoid us, either by their own choice or because they felt pressured by her side of the story. The hardest part was my conversation with Jake. He was one of the few who truly understood. He was the one who had told us about Megan's visits to the coffee shop, but even he seemed uncertain now. He told me it wasn't that simple, that there were people in the group who thought I had gone overboard. And as the days went on, Ryan and I were left with the quiet truth. We had lost people who mattered to us. No one wanted to be caught in the middle of this mess, and I couldn't blame them for not wanting to take sides, but it still hurt. That night, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea I hadn't touched, wondering if I had destroyed everything by standing my ground. It was one of those moments where you look at everything you've been fighting for, and you realize that sometimes, no matter how strong you stand, there's collateral damage. I couldn't even look at Ryan the same way. He wasn't mad at me, no, but I could tell he was struggling with everything that had happened. He had never seen me as the overprotective type. We had always been a team. But this situation made me question the foundation we had built. I had protected us, but now I was questioning the price. It wasn't until I ran into Emma again that everything started to feel clear. I hadn't expected to see her. After the fallout with Megan, I figured everyone would scatter. But Emma, who had been Megan's roommate, reached out to me, and her message felt urgent, like she needed to tell me something. I agreed to meet her for coffee, even though a part of me hesitated. When I saw her in the cafe, I noticed she was different. She wasn't defensive anymore. She didn't have that same self-righteous tone she'd had when she defended Megan. Now she looked more tired, more uncertain. "I never thought I'd be telling you this," Emma started, hesitating. "But I need to apologize. I wasn't sure where this was going." "What for?" "Living with Megan these last few months has been hard. More than I realized." She ran a hand through her hair, looking down for a moment. "She's obsessed. I know it's not something I can fix or even explain away, but I didn't see it until you forced her to face reality. Her eyes met mine then, full of regret. I was blind. I was trying to protect her, but in the process, I let her manipulate me, and I let her manipulate everyone. I should have said something sooner. I felt a wave of something wash over me, something I couldn't name right away. But there it was, an unexpected release. Emma was admitting something I had been thinking but couldn't say out loud. Megan had lied to everyone. She had twisted the narrative, making herself the victim when, in reality, she was the one who had crossed every line imaginable. Emma's voice softened. Megan confessed to me before she left. She told me how she had been waiting for you and Ryan to break up. She had been keeping track of your milestones. She knew everything. When you moved in together, when you started talking about marriage, even when you argued. She thought that if she waited long enough, Ryan would choose her. The weight of her words hit me all at once. Megan had been keeping a notebook of every moment, analyzing them like they were pieces of evidence in some twisted game she was playing in her mind. And now I understood what I had missed all along. Megan wasn't trying to steal Ryan in the way I had feared. She was convinced he belonged to her, and she had been playing a long game to get him. But I didn't know how far she'd gone until recently, Emma continued, her voice thick with guilt. She'd been driving by your place, watching. She said she was just checking in, but it was more than that. She was obsessed. At that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized this wasn't just about Megan anymore. It was about me reclaiming control over my own life. I had been reactive for so long, avoiding confrontation, making excuses, allowing other people to dictate the terms of my relationships. But now, after hearing Emma's confession, it felt like the scales had tipped. I wasn't just reacting to Megan anymore. I was deciding what came next. I was choosing how my story was going to unfold. I didn't have to keep apologizing for my feelings or my actions. I didn't have to feel guilty for protecting Ryan and me from someone who refused to respect our boundaries. Megan's delusion wasn't my problem anymore. I didn't want to ruin her life, I told Emma, my voice quiet but firm, but I had to protect my own. Emma nodded, wiping away a tear. I get it now. I wish I had seen it sooner. As we sat in that coffee shop with the world rushing by outside, I felt like I was waking up from a long, unsettling dream. The weight I had been carrying for so long, the guilt, the confusion, the sense of being trapped in someone else's narrative, was finally lifting. I realized it wasn't just about Megan. It was about me. It was about owning my boundaries, owning my decisions, and owning the space I took up in the world. When I left the cafe, something had shifted for the better. I felt lighter, and more importantly, I felt strong. The fallout came swiftly, and it was harder than I expected. The next few weeks after my conversation with Emma were a blur of phone calls, messages, and confrontations. It wasn't just about Megan anymore. It was about my family, my friends, and everything I thought I understood about loyalty and support. It all started with a phone call from my parents. They wanted to meet, to talk things through, as they put it. I knew what that meant. They wanted me to make amends with Keanu. They wanted me to fix things. The wedding had been canceled. The truth had been exposed. Keanu's reputation was in tatters. My parents, who had always stood by him, were angry. They wanted me to fix the situation, to smooth over the cracks in the family that I had caused by standing up for myself and my relationship. When I went to their house to meet them, I already knew what was coming. My mother started with a soft voice, trying to keep things calm. You know your brother didn't mean any harm, right? He was just trying to help you move on. He was trying to cheer you up. I stared at her, my heart sinking. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to ask how she could defend Keanu after everything he had done, but instead I just stayed silent. My father, who had always been the steady one, finally spoke up. Keanu is devastated, you know. His life has been turned upside down. His wedding is ruined. The family is in turmoil because of your actions. I held my breath, trying to keep my composure. I did what I had to do, I said. Keanu brought strippers to his apartment after Maddie died. He humiliated me and didn't respect my grief. What else was I supposed to do? Let him keep treating me like I was invisible? They didn't have an answer for that. My mother looked away, unable to meet my eyes. But you've caused so much damage, so much hurt. We're a family, Alyssa. We protect each other. And now, because of you, everything is falling apart. I felt the weight of her words like a physical blow. It wasn't just that they didn't understand, it was that they wanted me to be the one who apologized, to be the one who fixed it, as if I was the problem. I realized then that nothing I said would change their minds. I would never get their approval for what I did, because their loyalty was to Keanu, not to me. That night I went home, heart heavy. Callie, who had been mostly oblivious to everything, asked if we could visit Grandma and Grandpa soon. I told her maybe, but I wasn't sure when. The next few days, the calls and messages didn't stop. My mother left several voicemails, each one getting more desperate. "You've got to fix this, Alyssa. Keanu needs you. We need you." Then came the letter. A handwritten note from my father telling me that I was no longer welcome at family gatherings, that I had broken their hearts by exposing Keanu's betrayal, that I had destroyed my brother's happiness and humiliated the family. They told me they would no longer provide financial support for Callie's birthdays or holidays. They said that if I ever regretted my actions, I shouldn't bother reaching out because the damage was done. I stared at that letter for what felt like hours. The words, harsh and final, seemed to burn into my skin. This was my family. This was what I had been protecting all my life. But then something clicked inside me. I didn't need them. Not like this. Not if they couldn't see the truth. I had spent too many years trying to mold myself into what they wanted me to be, trying to fit into a family that was built on lies and denial. I read the letter again, slowly, and then, without a word, I folded it up and put it in a drawer. Callie asked about it later. I told her it was from Grandma and Grandpa. She asked what it said. "They're upset," I said, keeping my voice calm, "but we'll be okay." She seemed to understand. I didn't know if I would ever see my parents again, or if they would ever accept what I had done. But I did know one thing. I had taken control of my life. I had stood up for myself when no one else would. And Callie and I were going to be fine. We had each other. We didn't need anyone else to define us. Time has a way of shifting things. The grief, the anger, the tension. At first, it felt like I was holding my breath, suspended in a moment of pain, not sure which way was up. But with each passing day, I started to see things more clearly. I realized that I had been giving so much of myself to people who never really saw me for who I was. Not just my family, Keanu, my parents, but Megan too. I'd spent so much time trying to protect everyone's feelings, trying to make peace, that I lost sight of my own needs. And that was the lesson I learned the hardest way possible. You cannot protect everyone else without protecting yourself first. The house felt emptier without the hospital bed, the oxygen machine still sitting unused in the corner. But it was also quieter, more peaceful. Callie and I fell into a rhythm, a new one. I made a point of carving out time for us. We'd spend our weekends at the park or in the kitchen, baking cookies and laughing at the way they never quite turned out as expected. I'd read her stories, talk to her about what she was feeling, and be present for her in a way I had never been able to fully be while Maddie was sick. In the quiet, I found space for myself. I took up new hobbies, things I'd always wanted to try, but never made the time for. I started journaling again, something I used to love but stopped doing as life got more complicated. I took walks in the evening, just to clear my head and breathe deeply. I had forgotten how good it felt to just be me again. The world had kept moving, even though I felt stuck in this limbo of grief and anger. But now it was like the fog was finally lifting. Megan's absence was undeniable, but in a way, it freed me. The friendships that remained, those with people like Sarah, Jake, and a few others, were real. They didn't question my choices. They didn't doubt my relationship. They understood why I had done what I did. And when I looked at Ryan, I saw someone who had stood by me, who had supported me even when it wasn't easy. We hadn't just survived this. Together, we'd grown stronger. I still think about my parents, about the family I used to have. I think about Keanu, the way he never really apologized for what he did. But I also realized I couldn't keep hoping for their approval, their validation. I couldn't keep waiting for them to be who I needed them to be. As for Megan, I haven't heard from her since she left town. I don't know what she's doing now. I don't care to. But I did get closure when Emma reached out one last time. She told me Megan had left for a graduate program and was starting fresh somewhere else. Emma seemed relieved, but I could tell she still felt the weight of it all. I didn't blame her. She was caught in the middle of it, just like I was. I don't think I'll ever fully understand Megan's obsession, or why she felt entitled to so much of Ryan's attention. But I do understand one thing. We can't control other people's actions, only how we respond to them. And I've chosen peace. For me, for Callie, for Ryan. We're building a new life, one where I'm not haunted by the past, or trying to fix people who don't want to change. It's a life where my boundaries are respected, where I'm not afraid to stand up for myself, and where my happiness doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. So I guess that's the lesson I want to leave here. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to protect your peace. And when people cross lines, whether they're family, friends, or strangers, it's okay to walk away. Because the moment you stop apologizing for your boundaries is the moment you start reclaiming your life.